Have you ever noticed how the people who seem the most distant are often the ones who feel the most deeply? They pull away not because they don't care, but because they care more than they know how to handle. And sometimes, when they reject you, it isn't your worth they're questioning, it's their ability to face the mirror your love holds up to them. When an avoidant person rejects you, it often feels like a brutal ending, but what's truly happening beneath the surface is far more complex. Their rejection isn't always a declaration of disinterest. It's an emotional defense built over years of fear, pain, and learned self-protection. Avoidants are wired to equate closeness with danger. Deep inside, intimacy triggers a subconscious alarm system that tells them they are about to lose control, about to be consumed, about to be seen too deeply. The very connection they long for becomes the thing they fear most. So when love begins to reach them, their instinct is to pull away, to regain a sense of safety by rejecting the one who evokes those buried emotions. In truth, rejection becomes a form of emotional survival. This moment, when they distance themselves, is not a reflection of your inadequacy, but a mirror of their inner battle. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting the vulnerability that your presence awakens within them. Your acceptance, warmth, or emotional depth can feel like sunlight to someone who has lived too long in the shadows. It's too bright, too revealing. So they retreat, seeking the comfort of emotional solitude where they don't have to risk being hurt. Yet, paradoxically, their act of pushing away is also an unconscious test. They want to see whether your sense of self collapses when they withdraw, whether your love was rooted in need or strength, whether your world revolves around their presence or your own grounded being. That moment of rejection, then, is not simply an ending. It's a crossroad. The way you respond determines whether you surrender your power or reclaim it. If you chase, explain, or beg for closure, you confirm the avoidant's deepest fear, that intimacy leads to loss of autonomy, that love demands surrender of self. But when you pause, breathe, and choose to stand in your own emotional steadiness, something shifts. Your stillness tells them that their rejection does not define your worth. It communicates a kind of strength they didn't expect, a quiet power that says, "I see you, but I do not need to lose myself to keep you." Rejection, in this light, becomes a test of energy. It asks you to rise beyond reaction, because an avoidance world is built on control, control of distance, control of emotion, control of narrative. When you no longer play into that pattern, when you stop responding from the place of fear and start responding from presence, you break the cycle that keeps them locked in avoidance. You show that love can exist without pressure, that connection can breathe even in silence. That's when something begins to stir within them. For the first time, they see someone who doesn't try to invade their inner space, but respects it. They sense safety in your steadiness, not threat. To understand this dynamic is to see rejection not as rejection, but as revelation. It reveals how much of your own sense of worth is dependent on being chosen. It exposes whether your love is anchored in self-assurance or in fear of abandonment. If you can meet their withdrawal with emotional balance, you transform the entire relationship dynamic. You turn rejection into a mirror of growth, not a wound of loss. Because at that point, you're not just reacting to their behavior, you're mastering your own emotional landscape. This is what an avoidant secretly wishes you'd understand, that the moment they push you away is not the time to chase them, but the time to stand in your power. That space is not punishment, it's a language, a test of energy. They don't need you to close the gap for them. They need to feel that your presence remains strong, centered, and unshaken even when they retreat. When you hold that vibration, you don't lose them. You gain yourself. And from that grounded state, every interaction that follows becomes an act of strength, not surrender. Emotional distance is often misunderstood as disinterest, but for someone with an avoidant attachment pattern, distance is the only language they know when love begins to feel overwhelming. When they sense closeness forming, when they feel seen or emotionally touched, their system goes into alarm. Their instinct is to withdraw, to regain the illusion of safety through space. It isn't that they don't feel, it's that feeling deeply threatens the fragile balance they've built between control and vulnerability. But what they don't realize is that in creating space, they unintentionally trigger the one thing that might awaken them: awareness. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop fighting for closeness, your silence begins to speak directly to the part of them they've spent years avoiding, their own emotional truth. Avoidants live inside a quiet contradiction. They crave connection, but fear the dependency that comes with it. They want to be loved, but they dread being needed. When you pull back your energy after rejection, you interrupt the emotional pattern that defines their relationships. They expect pursuit, argument, or persuasion, something to validate their belief that love always demands too much. But your emotional distance breaks that narrative. It confronts them with something they don't know how to handle: peace. Suddenly they're left with silence where they expected reaction, calm where they expected chaos. And that silence becomes their mirror. It reflects not your absence, but their own. At first, they may interpret your withdrawal as indifference, but as time passes, that perception begins to shift. Your stillness exposes the emptiness they carry when there's no one to project their fear onto. The emotional space forces them to confront the loneliness they've disguised as independence. They begin to feel the weight of what they've lost, not just your presence, but the safety your connection provided. Emotional distance in this way becomes a kind of medicine, bitter at first, but ultimately healing, because it gives them something they've never truly had: the experience of being allowed to come forward by choice, not pressure. Your distance is not punishment, it's clarity. It tells them, without words, that love can exist without control. It shows them that you can hold care and boundaries in the same hand. It demonstrates that your value does not shrink because someone stepped away. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you create space for them to feel yours. It's a paradox of human psychology. The less you try to convince someone to see you, the clearer your presence becomes. Avoidants are often drawn back not to noise, but to energy that feels grounded and self-contained. When you stop radiating desperation, your energy becomes magnetic. It's calm, it's confident, and it subtly calls them toward the emotional ground they've never found within themselves. In this space, their awareness begins to awaken. They start noticing the contrast between the safety of solitude and the richness of connection. They begin to sense that their avoidance isn't freedom, it's isolation. And because you've stepped back with grace instead of resentment, they can begin to explore those realizations without shame. This is how emotional distance transforms from separation into reflection. It gives them the psychological space to feel what was previously buried under defensiveness. It lets them miss you in a way that's safe for them, without guilt, without expectation. So, when you stop chasing, you are not abandoning them. You're allowing their mind and heart to meet. You are showing them what maturity looks like: presence without pressure, love without demand. You are teaching them through silence what words could never convey: that your value does not depend on their acceptance, and your love does not need their validation to exist. And in that calm, grounded distance, they begin to feel something unfamiliar: the awareness that the connection they tried to escape may be the very one they were always searching for. The moment after rejection reveals far more about you than about the person who rejected you. When an avoidant pulls away, they are unconsciously observing your reaction. To them, The aftermath of rejection becomes a silent test of emotional safety. If you crumble, plead, or try to win them back, it confirms their deepest fear. That closeness means losing themselves, that love comes with pressure, and that intimacy will always demand more than they can give. But when you respond with grounded calm, you disrupt that narrative. You show that your self-worth isn't tied to their acceptance, and that your love is a reflection of strength, not dependence. How you handle rejection doesn't just influence how they see you, it reveals how you see yourself. An avoidant's entire defense system is built on the belief that emotional closeness leads to pain, that people will try to change them, consume them, or use their vulnerability against them. When they withdraw, it's not because they don't care, but because they don't trust emotional safety. The energy that follows rejection either reinforces or challenges that belief. If you chase, you validate their fears. They read your urgency as proof that love equals control. But if you stand still, centered in your value, you offer them a new experience, one where love exists without demand. That steadiness disarms them more than any words ever could. They begin to sense that your energy isn't seeking to possess them. It's simply present, strong, and self-contained. Your reaction, in essence, becomes a mirror of your inner world. If you react with panic, it reveals emotional dependency. If you react with anger, it reveals wounded pride. But when you respond with composure, it reveals emotional maturity, the rare ability to hold both care and self-respect at once. That energy is magnetic. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't plead, it invites. It doesn't dramatize, it simply exists in truth. To an avoidant, this is something foreign. They are used to emotional extremes, people who either cling too tightly or detach completely. But when they see you neither collapsing nor running, something shifts within them. You represent stability, the one thing their inner world lacks. This reaction also redefines power. Many believe power is about control, who withdraws first, who speaks last, who appears unaffected. But real power after rejection lies in emotional integrity. It's the ability to remain authentic without losing composure, to still feel love without abandoning self-respect. When you show that balance, you become unpredictable to the avoidant's conditioned mind. They can no longer categorize you as someone who will try to fix them or force intimacy. Instead, they start to view you as someone capable of meeting them from a place of strength rather than need. In this stillness, something subtle happens. Your presence begins to carry a quiet authority. It's not born of superiority or manipulation. It's born of alignment. You no longer seek to prove your worth. You embody it. You no longer seek validation, you radiate it. This is the energy that makes the avoidant reconsider their assumptions about connection. They begin to see that emotional closeness doesn't always mean enmeshment, and that being seen doesn't always lead to being controlled. Your calm becomes an emotional anchor they didn't know they needed. Every time you react from strength instead of scarcity, you reclaim your sense of self. You shift the power dynamic from dependency to equality, because in truth, the only power anyone has over you is the power you give through your reactions. When you choose not to engage in the old dance of chase and withdrawal, you change the rhythm entirely. You start communicating through energy instead of emotion, through silence instead of defense. And though they may not admit it, the avoidant begins to feel something new, a respect that emerges when someone can love without losing themselves. This is the essence of taking back your power after rejection. It's not about pretending you don't care or shutting down emotionally. It's about standing firm in your truth, holding compassion in one hand and self-worth in the other. When you do that, You stop being a participant in their fear and become a reflection of what safety feels like. And that quiet confidence leaves an imprint no avoidance can ever erase. Stillness is one of the most misunderstood forms of power. When someone with an avoidant attachment pattern rejects you, they unconsciously expect a reaction: pleading, chasing, emotional explanation. These behaviors confirm their internal narrative that love equals chaos. That connection always leads to loss of autonomy. But when you choose stillness instead of pursuit, you disrupt everything they believe about relationships. You stop feeding the cycle of fear and defense. Stillness becomes a mirror that reflects their own patterns back to them, without blame, without resistance. It introduces silence into a space that has always been filled with noise, and that silence begins to speak to them in ways words never could. Avoidants are drawn to distance because it gives them control. When someone steps back without resentment, it confuses their emotional system. They are used to people trying to prove love through persistence, used to being chased as a way of validating their worth. But when that chase disappears, they lose their familiar sense of control. Suddenly, there's no one to define them, no one to resist, no one to push away. The emotional game they've always relied on falls apart, and in that space of nothingness, they begin to feel something new: curiosity. Your stillness becomes a question their mind can't easily answer. Why aren't they reacting? That question opens a door inside them that logic can't close. Curiosity is the beginning of awareness. When you stop explaining and start living, your energy shifts from dependence to sovereignty. The avoidant senses this on a level beyond words. They can feel that you've turned inward, that you're no longer orbiting their emotional state. And this change creates an energetic vacuum. Humans are drawn to mystery, but avoidants especially are drawn to what feels emotionally stable and unreachable at the same time. Your calm detachment doesn't repel them. It draws them in. They begin to sense that there's depth behind your silence, something unspoken that they want to understand. Stillness then becomes magnetic. It doesn't chase or demand. It allows them to approach on their own terms, which is the only way they ever truly open. This doesn't mean stillness is a tactic or a form of manipulation. It's an act of self-preservation and self-respect. It says, I'm not withdrawing to punish you. I'm withdrawing to return to myself. It's about finding peace in your own center rather than being pulled into the emotional turbulence of someone else's fear. That kind of energy is powerful because it cannot be controlled. It's grounded, quiet, and self-sufficient. And when the avoidant senses that, something within them begins to shift. They no longer see you as a threat to their independence. They begin to recognize you as someone who embodies balance, someone who can care deeply without becoming consumed. Stillness also breaks the emotional predictability that fuels avoidance. When you stop explaining yourself, the relationship dynamic becomes less about control and more about reflection. They begin to feel their own emotions rise in the absence of yours. They feel the emptiness that distance brings, but this time they can't blame you for it because you didn't chase or fight. The silence leaves them alone with themselves, and that's where awareness begins. They start to miss the emotional steadiness you offered, the warmth that didn't demand, the presence that didn't pressure. The mystery of your stillness makes them confront their own resistance to love. Over time, this quiet energy does something profound. It restores balance. It allows you to take back your emotional autonomy and forces them to confront the reality that true intimacy doesn't need to be earned through struggle. Your stillness becomes a living example of emotional maturity, a state they both fear and admire. In your calm, they see what they have been running from: peace, vulnerability, and connection that doesn't wound. And even if they don't return, the impression remains, Because stillness doesn't scream or demand recognition, it lingers. It becomes a silent echo in their mind, a reminder that the person who once sought them has now become their mirror, reflecting what love could look like if only they had the courage to stop running. Taking back your power after rejection begins with one simple truth. Love loses its purity when it becomes a plea for validation. When an avoidant rejects you, the instinctive reaction is to fix, to prove, to make them see your worth. But this impulse does not heal you. It drains you. The real transformation begins when you turn that energy inward, when you stop chasing someone's understanding and begin nurturing your own. Choosing yourself after rejection is not an act of pride. It is an act of awakening. It means you no longer seek worth through someone else's acceptance. You realize that rejection doesn't define your value. It only reveals where you were giving your power away. Avoidants pull away, not because you lack something, but because they fear emotional exposure. When they retreat, the silence they leave behind often feels unbearable, as though your sense of love and identity was taken with them. But that emptiness isn't a loss. It's space. Space for you to return home to yourself. In that quiet, you begin to hear the parts of you that were silenced in the pursuit of their affection. You start to see how much of your energy went into managing their emotions, interpreting their distance, and trying to be enough. Choosing yourself means you stop doing that. You stop waiting for their response to decide how you should feel. You start creating peace instead of waiting for it to be given to you. When you shift the focus from them to yourself, your energy changes completely. Instead of radiating longing, you radiate presence. Instead of chasing love, you embody it. This transformation is deeply magnetic because it's rooted in authenticity, not strategy. The avoidant, who once pulled away to protect their independence, begins to sense a different kind of strength in you, the kind that doesn't need them to feel whole. That energy is not loud or performative. It's calm, grounded, and confident. You become a reflection of the stability they've been running from, but secretly desire. Your focus on yourself shows them that love can coexist with freedom, that closeness doesn't have to mean suffocation. Taking back your power is also about detachment, not the cold kind that denies emotion, but the kind that honors it without being enslaved by it. Detachment means you can love someone and still let them go. It means you can care deeply and still protect your peace. You begin to see love as an extension of self-respect, not self-sacrifice. You start to value your inner world more than the external validation of being chosen. This shift breaks the emotional dependency that often keeps people trapped in the cycle of rejection and pursuit. Because when your happiness no longer depends on another's response, no one can truly take your power from you. This inner reclamation doesn't go unnoticed. Avoidants, who thrive on control and emotional predictability, become unsettled when they sense they no longer have emotional power over you. Your energy no longer feeds their avoidance, it challenges it. They begin to feel the contrast between your self-contained peace and their inner chaos. For perhaps the first time, they experience love that isn't born from fear or need, but from wholeness, and that kind of love has gravity. It draws them in, not because you're trying to make them come back, but because your energy now represents safety rather than pressure. Yet, the deeper reward of choosing yourself is not what it does to them. It's what it does to you. You start to experience emotional freedom, a state where your worth is no longer negotiable. You understand that love is not about convincing someone to stay. It's about remaining true to yourself no matter who leaves. You realize that peace is not something others give. It's something you protect. When you embody this awareness, rejection stops being rejection. It becomes redirection. It leads you back to your center, to the place where your worth was never in question. And from that place, you no longer seek to be chosen. You choose yourself again and again until love is no longer a battlefield, but a reflection of your own wholeness. The truth is, rejection from an avoidant isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-mastery. Every distance they create becomes an invitation for you to return home to yourself. Every silence teaches you to listen to your own voice instead of chasing theirs. Every moment you resist the urge to prove your worth, you reclaim a piece of your power. Because love isn't about who stays, it's about who stands strong when everything else falls apart. The shift you make after rejection defines not only the future of that relationship, but the strength of your inner world. When you stop chasing and start choosing, you move from reaction to realization. You realize that love doesn't need to be begged for, it needs to be embodied. The avoidance withdrawal becomes your awakening, a reminder that no one can truly abandon you when you no longer abandon yourself. Taking back your power doesn't mean walking away in anger, it means walking back into your truth. It means finding peace in stillness, confidence in space, and strength in letting go. Because when you stand in that energy, unmoved, whole, and free, you become something rare in a world of emotional chaos. A person who can love without losing themselves. And that, more than anything, is what every avoidant secretly wishes you'd do.